This Friday edition of the Town Hall, as we do most weeks in the fall. We're going to talk about football. The Bills are back at home this Sunday afternoon, hosting the Washington football team. They're coming off a blowout win down in Miami last week, 35-zip. But while they're top of the division and just shut out a rival on the road, fans are still a little concerned about some things they've seen the first 2 weeks. So we're going to be joined once again by one of the best experts to talk about the state of the Bills, our pal Vic Carucci, Channel 2 Bills contributor. You can watch him weekly on Sports Talk Live Monday nights. You can also hear him on Sirius XM as well. Vic, thanks for coming on. We're excited for a strong internet signal, so we'll get right into it. We want to talk about everyone's biggest concern to start, Josh Allen's sort of slow start to the season. It feels a little weird to talk about it after scoring 35 points last week, but he's been talking about it. So how big of a concern should his play be for fans right now?
Yeah, I don't think it should be as big as it is made out to be. And I understand where it's all coming from. We saw a team that averaged 31 plus points per game last year on the way to finishing 13-3. We saw Josh as the runner-up for MVP. We want that Josh, or fans do, every game. And you don't get that guy every game. You didn't really get him every game even last year, but he did have most games where he was at the top of his game. And in 2 games, we haven't seen it. We've seen struggles. And he, I think, exacerbates that by talking about his own concern, acknowledging it. Leaders do own their struggles. That's a good quality. It's a great quality that Josh has, stand-up guy. But I think it just has fed into this thought that he's not doing enough. And frankly, I think when your team has won a game, coming off a big win, and Josh knows this, and he has said this before, it doesn't really matter who got you there, you're there. And the defense got him there, so that's a good thing. And I think there should be more attention to that and less attention to this offense that I think eventually gets out of its own way and figures it out.
So let's get into it with the Bills defense. They held the Dolphins, without a single point on Sunday, and yet more people seem to be talking about the offense this week. Is the defense, do you think, being overshadowed with the focus being on the other side?
Kate, I really do. I think unfairly, these guys, this was the area of the team that drew the most complaints from last year, frankly. The running game was also a concern or an issue, disappointment, but the defense, and especially in that AFC Championship game against Kansas City, boy, if they only could have had a pass rush, if they only could have done more there against Patrick Mahomes and company. Well, they set out to improve it, and by the looks of it, it is working out. They've given up 1 touchdown defensively in 2 games. That's impressive. The way they beat up on Miami, I mean, really, it was a physical beatdown at the line of scrimmage. They owned them from the start of the game to the end. Very impressive. And that is where there should be optimism drawn, or from which it should be drawn, because you've got a defense that's playing better and an offense with all this talent that can't possibly stay bad for very long.
Vic, I always like talking to you because, what I know about football can fit on the head of a pin. So I want to talk to you about kind of an interesting situation this weekend. The Bills and Panthers connection over the past few years is well known since Coach Sean McDermott, arrived here in Buffalo. But one of the most familiar faces for McDermott is now running the show in Washington. So tell us a little bit more about that connection between he and Ron Rivera.
Yeah, so the two of them, of course, work together, have history from the time that Sean entered the league in Philadelphia. Ron Rivera, of course, there as well. And then Ron and Leslie Frazier, the Bills defensive coordinator, were teammates in Chicago. So there's a connection there, as there was with Leslie and Ron on the coaching staff in Philly. And then in Carolina, Ron gets the head coaching job. He makes Sean his defensive coordinator after Sean was fired in Philadelphia from the same job. So he gives him this opportunity, and Sean runs with it. I mean, helps build this defense that gets to a Super Bowl and really builds up his resume, his credentials, and ultimately lands a job as a head coach with the Buffalo Bills. So he owes a lot to Ron. I think he patterns very much of what he does as a coach after Ron. And I think their knowledge of each other will factor into how each prepares this game. I mean, you have to have some, I'm not necessarily talking about specific play calls or language, coding, all that stuff. I'm talking about just the tendencies.
Right, even just the approach.
Yeah.
Finally, Vic, about a minute left. Washington has a couple of really good pass rushers in Chase Daniel and Montez Sweat. So how big of a challenge do they pose to the Bills' offensive line?
Well, they should pose more of a challenge given how much talent they have. And they're monster guys. They're really tall, long-armed guys. They have that quality. But it's a defense that gave up 400-plus yards in the first game, a loss to the Los Angeles Chargers. And then the second game, the New York Giants went up and down the field on them and ultimately won that game, came down to a last-second kick. So their defense hasn't played well. And all the stuff people are saying about the Bills' offense, questioning it, they were expecting the Washington defense to be really strong, and they're not seeing that either. So it's kind of a similar pattern between these teams.
We've been chatting with Two on Your Side Bills contributor Vic Carucci. It's always great to see you, Vic, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, Kate.
And that is the town hall for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have questions or comments, you can text them to 716-849-2220. Hope you have a great weekend. We're back on Monday.